I will be introducing you to one of my favorite people in the entire world, and that is Mr. Nicholas Ray Coffing. Nick is one of the camp directors at Canyon Creek Summer Camp, a premier overnight summer camp in the heart of the Angeles Forest.
I do think there is some magic. There's some things that happen at camp that just weirdly just can't happen anywhere else. But, when people say the magic of camp, certainly think you don't want to discredit the vast amount of time and energy and intention that's put into it.
It's tough because I think describing what camp and the camp job is hard enough. And so describing what makes the perfect counselor is, I think, even harder.
I can teach them things about themselves and about life that school just can't. Empathy to me is, I guess I understand why it can be hard to people, but it's also frustrating. Like, it shouldn't be hard because everyone's gone through the same thing. After the first day, I remember I called my mom and I said, they're great people, but it's not for me. It took a little bit to click. And I said, I can do one summer. It'll be fine. And then 15 years later, I've never met a parent who, when I've told them that, they were like...
In this episode, I will be introducing you to one of my favorite people in the entire world, and that is Mr. Nicholas Ray Coffing. Nick is one of the camp directors at Canyon Creek Summer Camp, a premier overnight summer camp in the heart of the Angeles Forest. Canyon Creek offers a diverse camp program which is designed to give kids a safe space to be active, try new things, take reasonable risks and step out of their comfort zones. Over the years, Nick has been both a mentor and a counsellor for people of every age and background, and he has become a valued member of so many different communities. He warms and welcomes every single person that comes into his orbit, and I'm a better person for knowing him. I'm forever grateful to have experienced both his friendship and leadership. It's an honour to have him as part of my community and my kind of people, and I have no doubt that he will be your kind of person too. Welcome to the podcast, Nick Coffing.
Hi, thank you. That was very, very kind.
You're very welcome. All true things. So, Nick, you are here on the podcast. You are loved. How are you? And what are you feeling grateful for today?
I'm doing well. I think I'm grateful that I don't have any complaints.
That is that's a great place to start.
Yeah. And I'm sure you can nitpick things, but generally speaking, the kind of the state things are in on kind of a national and global scale. I have an immense amount of things to be grateful for, and a small amount of things to not. So
yes, as we like to say at camp, it's going to be a great day.
It is.
So, Nick, I would like to start by giving the audience a little insight as to how we crossed paths. So how did we meet?
Yeah. So we met at a little place called Canyon Creek Summer Camp. And so I'm the director at. And I started in 2006. So before pandemic, this would have been my 15th summer at camp, but unfortunately we had to put things on pause. And I want to say we met in the summer of 2013 or 2014.
15, but it feels like we've known each other 7 years.
It really does. Oh, wow.
We really packed 2 extra years into that 2015.
Exactly. I think that's like a prime example of how quick friendships, especially ours, but just friendships in general, can't move.
Absolutely.
It's a very unique place, and you can pack a lot of years in 2.5, 3 months.
100%.
So you were a counselor, and in 2015, not 2013 or 2014 but 2015.
That 2015 was a long old year.
Exactly. And you were. It was great. I felt like we had a great connection from the jump.
Absolutely.
And I know Squire talked a lot about you kind of coming in the summer. He was a head counselor and someone I hired years ago. And
maybe back in 2013.
I know exactly. And he talked you up and said he had the kind of the perfect person to work at camp, and so I think that even helped accelerate our friendship more, from the beginning, because I had kind of, we had a good jumping point.
Yeah, absolutely. And I admire Adam so much, because we had our first ever job together.
Oh, did birthday parties, right?
Yeah, we did birthday parties. So it started out with running after kids, doing that. And I know we both really admire him. So big up to Adam Squire for doing that. It was super kind. So before we learn a little bit more about your work at camp, I would love the community to learn more about you as a person. So where have you grown and flown? Where did you grow up, or where was your hometown, and where would you consider home now?
Yeah. So I grew up in Indianapolis, Indiana, in the heart of the Midwest. And I grew up there. And for, a long time, all the way through high school, and I did a little college there. And so I, for the first 21 years of my life, for the most part.
Wow, that's a long time.
Aside from a couple summers, at camp, the first few summers. And then I would, come out to California, do camp. Then I would, fly home and, do life there, and then back and forth. And then around 2011, 2012, so about 8 years ago, is when I moved here. I did a small stint in New York for a little bit, and then kind of backing around. But for the most part, the last 8 years have been in Los Angeles. So, and so I always consider Indianapolis my home. But LA is certainly my second home for sure.
Absolutely. So you started in Indianapolis, and you currently live in Los Angeles. Where on that journey did you start to develop your passion for camp counseling and directing? Was that always your passion?
It wasn't. Well, I guess I think with kind of any passion or anything, it oftentimes you don't realize it until it becomes it. And then you kind of look back and you're like, oh, wait, that was kind of something I've been into for a long time. So I grew up going to church camp most of my life since I was 7. And so I went to camp for years. Every summer. And then around high school, I started doing other things during the summer, so I stopped going. But it was great. I always look back on it really fondly. And then the summer that I started Canyon Creek, I thought about that summer and thinking about maybe doing a camp. And I thought about going to the camp I grew up at, but it's a religious-based camp, and I didn't necessarily know if that was the direction I wanted to go at the time. And so I was going to Indiana University in Bloomington, and talk about, I tell people that it's weird because, whether you know it or not, sometimes like one decision can just alter, the whole course. Definitely. But sometimes you don't realize that at the time. And of course I didn't realize at the time, but it's interesting because I can pinpoint that one specific day and that one decision. I was my college roommate. We grew up together. He was a year older than me. So he was a sophomore and I was a freshman at IU. And he had worked at the summer camp the summer before, after his freshman year. And I think that's kind of what he got in my head a little bit during living with him during the year. And he was kind of talking about his camp that he worked at. And the day that we at IU does a really large summer camp job fair, one of the bigger ones in the country. So a lot of camps around the country recruit. And I had a children's literature class I was in. And and my roommate, Clifton was his name. He said, hey, I want to go to the Union to my old camp is there. They have this job fair. Would you want to go? And he said, if you go with me, I'll take you to lunch. And he had a car on campus. So I was like, great. And so I decided, I don't need to go to children's lit. And so I skipped the class and I went with him, and he was talking to his friend at his camp. So I was like, I'll just cruise around. And then I was like, I grew up going to summer camp. I want to see if my camp's here. And they were there. So I talked to them for a little bit. And so I just kind of walked around, and I met a girl named Peachy, or Debbie Peachy. and she, you know, had a booth, and she was playing Jimmy Eat World.
Always a great start.
Yes, of course. She was playing it like on this little speaker, and I was like, "Oh, it's kind of cool." Like no one else is like playing music, and so I was talking to her, and she gave me the application, and so I was like, "Oh, that sounds kind of cool. California, I've never been." And then about 3 weeks later, I was writing a paper, and I looked in my desk drawer, and I saw like the brochure, and so I was like, "Oh, you know what? Like, I think I might apply." So I applied, and then the rest, is kind of history.
Yeah.
And that was my first summer. And so it's crazy. If I don't skip Children's Lit and I don't go to that fair,
you didn't have that promise of lunch.
Exactly. If I didn't love the broccoli cheddar cheese bowl soup at Panera Bread so much at the time, I haven't had it in probably since that day.
Yeah.
But, at the time, he was like, "Yeah, I'll take you to Panera." And I was like, "Great."
Sold.
That broccoli cheddar soup bowl and the bread bowl is fantastic.
Exactly.
But yeah. So if I don't go to that fair, then, crazy. I mean, and even if you just kind of extrapolate it even further, I never work at camp, but I also never go to, I never go to England. I never meet Squire. I never hire Squire. I never meet you. So it's crazy.
Nuts. I had a kind of similar experience with camp in that we have a thing called Camp America in England. So that's how me and Squire applied. Yeah. And they're very strong on you cannot choose where you go. So you either put your application online and it kind of goes to the application gods. And based on what's on there, people might see it and contact you. Or the only way you might have a tiny bit of choice is to go to the Camp America Fair, which is on, I think, in January, in various places in the country, in England. And so, I'd wanted to do Camp America for a few years. A few things came up the year I was going to go, so couldn't. And so eventually I was like, right, I was 22 as I'm doing this. I'm going to do Camp America. So I put my application out in September, and so you're not flying out to camp to June. And then I remember one night I was so excited I couldn't sleep, and I was like, this is ridiculous. You're not going anywhere till June. What is the matter with you? This is going to be a long stint of sleepless nights if you don't get yourself together. So I was like, do you know what? If I'm excited, it's because I'm curious. I can't sleep anyway, so I'm going to go online and I'm going to Google some camps. But whatever you do, Meg, do not fall in love with anywhere, because you can't go. Yeah. You can't choose that place. So I go online, and they say also do not contact directors, because, you're not meant to contact them directly. They see your application. So I go online and I'm flicking through, and I was like, it'd be cool to see places on the West Coast, because I've experienced and traveled to a lot of the East Coast. And then I just randomly stumbled across Canyon Creek, and I immediately fell in love with it. And I was like, uh-oh. And I was just like, I can't do anything.
I'm doing the same thing. I'm doing the very thing I told myself.
Exactly. This is already gone so badly for you. So then I just navigated over to the very clear contact us part. And I'm like, well, I'm just going to look, because of course I'm not going to contact them, because I'm not allowed to. That would be silly. That would also be getting off to the wrong start. And then I see the contact for Daryl, and I think, well, what if I just ask ambiguous questions? Nothing about hiring me. Just, you know, I have a background in lots of different things. So are they looking for general counsellors? So I sent the email. My friend was like, what were you doing? You're not meant to do that. And I was like, well, then if I'm not meant to do it, I won't be going there anyway. Because they'll be cross with me. So Daryl replied to my question. He was like, I quite like the sound of you. So just let me know when your application goes live and I'll look for you. And then a couple of days later, Squire puts up a post on Facebook, and it's of Canyon Creek. And I was like, no, this can't be, because there are thousands of camps in America.
Yeah.
So I sent a little message, and I was like, this isn't Canyon Creek, California, is it? He's like, yeah, that's been my camp for 2 years. And I was like, oh my goodness.
That's crazy.
That is because we're from a little town. We're from a little area in the UK. We're not far from each other at all, where we were from. And I was like, this is absolutely nuts. And I said to him, like, I've got a interview set up. And then, the interview went well. And what was so interesting as well, like, I spoke to other friends who'd done Camp America, and they were just like, don't. Oh, even Squire said, like, oh, if you haven't emailed, then I'd go to the camp fair. That's always a better way of doing it. And when I had my interview with Daryl and spoke to him, he was like, actually, for the first year kind of ever in a long while, we're not going to the camp fair this year. No one's going. So if I'd followed everyone's advice, I would have gone to the camp fair. No one from Canyon Creek would have been there. It was
That's That's crazy because I didn't know that part. I just assumed that he had told you.
No, I had no idea.
That's crazy.
It was literally.
It's funny because they tell people, not to do that, and it's like a half and half. Some people, I don't want to say respect it, but don't do it. And then there's a lot of people that do. But but it's even crazier because sometimes, because we get emails all the time, Daryl and I, and it's sometimes the luck of the draw. Sometimes the email hits your inbox just at the right time because there's always kind of, not right now because everything's kind of up in the air with just the J1 visa. And it's looking good that it will happen. But they're very, very well, it could put a stop to things. But usually right around now, Daryl and I will get tons of emails, from camp leaders and Camp America. And sometimes it's just, you can tell like, okay, you've just copied and pasted this email. Yeah. Like I got ones that like, they didn't even put my name right. Like they forgot, and they put, I forget what camp it was, but you could tell they had copied and pasted and just swapped out the name and the camp names, but they had forgot to do that with me. And it was like Dave or some name like that. And I was like, I don't think, so it's interesting, even though like you reached out, because sometimes it's like, it's kind of the luck of the draw, even doing that.
For sure. It was just a crazy series of events, really. As I say, I was respectful in that, as I'm not going to ask to come in any way, but at least I could get to know more information and how that works, and then we can go from there. And I thought maybe in my head, because friends had said go to the camp fair, I said maybe they'll go to the camp fair, who knows. And then just randomly seeing Squire's post like 2 days later. It was like after I'd booked, maybe it was a little bit later, because after I booked my interview with Daryl.
And then you saw.
Yeah, and I was like, this is absolutely unbelievable. And
those camp fairs are crazy. I've done all of them that we've gone to. And it is wild. Because I've always chose the one that's the London Fair. Because they start in January all the way through February, and some of them you can do like a tour, and so you'll go to like London and Glasgow, and you'll do like 4 of them, and then some of them are very small, and they're like, hey, it's at this small university, maybe 100 people are going to come through, but it like they work it into this like 10-day tour thing. But I always did the one in London in February, which they're like, this is the one in January and February are 2 biggest. Usually January is, I think, probably slightly bigger by numbers. February is more intense because this is like, there's not, most camps try to hire by March 1st. Many camps will tell you they do. Most camps don't do it. They're still hiring people by April and May.
Keep them key.
Just plug in exactly. Plug those little holes. But, March 1st is always kind of like the especially for sleep break camps. So like you'd love to have as many people, plug in. And so when you go to that fair and there's like 1,500 people. Yeah. And like, I remember we walked in my first one, and we walked in and there's a queue, not a line, a queue. Thank you. Exactly. All the way around the building and everything. And we get off the bus and like, we are going in, and like all these people like were clapping for us, and like, oh my goodness, all these applicants. And I was like, this is so, and it's crazy because some camps can hire, they hire a lot more. And so we hire, around 50-ish full counselors, but, we have a staff about 80 to 100 when you put in all of our, different departments and everyone, specialists and stuff. But usually at that fair, I'm only hiring like 5 people, usually 3 guys, 2 girls. And because we're in California, and people look us up. I mean, we're technically in Los Angeles County, so we're about an hour and 10 minutes from LA. So out of many camps, we're probably at the top tier. Mm-hmm. I mean, and I think we're top tier just for programming and what we've built. But just from on paper, when people are looking at going to America, and nothing against, a small camp in Wisconsin, but I'm, I have the slight edge when, someone's like, would you rather go to the backwoods of Wisconsin or would you rather go to Los Angeles? And most people, so, and we hire general counselors, not a ton of specialists. So I get in my very first fair and I had probably at least 100 people in line, at least instantly. People ran to our table, and you have to like make it. It's such a wild day. Yeah, because I have to basically I have to decide to them. Like I interview them, and then I just have to say yes or no. And it's like a gut feeling. And I've had people cry at the table. I've had people get mad, and it's just like It is a fun trip to go, obviously going abroad and everything, and it's great to see it. I don't do well with confrontation at times. I've gotten much better over my life, but it is a very tough. It is a tough thing because you're basically denying their,
breaking their dreams.
Yeah, it's like they want to go to America, and they're like. Yeah. I basically no, sorry.
And to their face, it's quite difficult. Yeah. Is that why you played the Dave card? Like, don't blame me, blame Dave.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well,
send him an email.
The good thing is, there is a when I went, there was a camp in Florida, and he was hiring like 150 people.
Wow.
So he basically told us, like, because you go to a little thing the night before with the directors and meet people because you're all in the same hotel, and he basically told people like, hey. This is my booth number. Don't send me anyone that you wouldn't hire at all. But if there's someone that doesn't quite fit your camp, but are probably, that you think are good, they just, you can only hire a few, like send them to my table because there's a good chance I'm going to hire
a
lot of people. So that was great. I had, I don't remember his name now. I wish it was Dave, but we'll just call him Dave. Dave from Florida. But that was great because I was like, and he was near, I think, Disney World. I mean, so he had kind of a good location too. And so there are some people like, look, I'm not the great fit, but go to that booth and
such a good fallback. Like it's a no from me, I'm afraid. But would you like to go to Disneyland? Go see Dave at booth 105.
Yeah, exactly. And I remember one girl I said no to, and she was just crying and mad. I mean, she could not understand why I said no. And she was like, look, I have all of these certifications. She was like, I had this binder with like every certification you could have gotten. And on paper, she was probably great. And she was probably, but talking about just camp and just having to kind of fit, and kind of have that gut feeling. It was tough because she kept pushing me when I said no. And she was like, I don't understand. Look at this. And so I didn't really want to tell her, because you kind of have to it's like a gut feeling. And I finally, she kind of pushed me to the point because she would not leave my table. And I finally just said, look, I can only hire 2 girls at this fair. And I have to go on a gut feeling. And my gut feeling is you are perfect on paper, but I don't think you're going to be the best fit for us. And whatever. And I didn't want to, I was like trying to say everything, to not have to tell her like, hey, my gut feeling is you're not going to be that great. Yeah. And finally I said that, she was, got really mad, but then I had to, I just know, your own culture, your own community at the camp. And I just didn't think, it was going to be a good fit. And fast forward to the end of the fair, I had never been to Nando's. And I had 2 counselors come.
A cheeky Nando's.
Exactly. 2 counselors come and they're like, oh, we got to take you, whatever. It's all right, great. And so you go to Nando's and we were sitting down and I sat down next to her and her mom at Nando's, like down the street. So I was like, so my first experience at Nando's, although it was really great food wise, it was really awkward because there's this girl that I like broke her heart, and now I'm sitting eating Nando's with her son right next to them at the table, and I was like, this is
not so cheeky Nando's while she's crying into her chicken. Yeah. No. So that it's so tough, and I know you would always give that feedback with kindness. You're someone who's so kind and such a good leader. As a camp director, you are involved in the recruitment of staff. So what values do you look for as a leader when recruiting new counsellors?
Yeah. It's tough because I think describing what camp and the camp job is hard enough. And so describing what makes the perfect counselor is, I think, even harder because it's a lot of gut feeling, but it's a lot of just kind of smaller, different things. Like I said, using her as an example. I mean, she was great on paper. I'm sure she probably was going to be a good, I'm sure she worked at a camp and was fantastic. But for me, having worked at, Cane Creek for so long and knowing what it was, and I've been fortunate enough over the last number of years to help shape what it's become. And so I kind of know who I'd want to have, and who would fit with our campers and everything. But, for the most part, I think they have to love working with kids and be excited about that part. And just kind of there for the right reasons.
Absolutely.
Especially at the Camp America fair, even some of the easier no's for me were people that were like, Los Angeles is great. And like I said, well, we spent the first 2 minutes talking about LA, which is great. And don't get me wrong, but are you really, coming here to come to America? Or are you coming here just to come to LA, or are you coming here for the right reasons? And I'll always tell people I'd rather have a staff member who might struggle at the job from the get-go, but is there for the right reasons. Yeah. I would take them, way over someone who might be a plug and play rock star person, but who's not there for the right reasons. I'd rather have that person kind of struggle and work with them all summer because they're there for the right reasons versus someone who's just there just for the social aspect and stuff. And don't get me wrong, social aspect and being at camp, that's a great part of sleepaway camp. But you can't lose focus of the main reason. Yeah. And so, usually in interviews and things like that, trying to make sure they're for the right reasons, but also understand that, for people that they might not know it fully, but they understand that the camp job is one of the hardest jobs that they'll ever have. On paper, it seems, and just like in the meeting and everything, it seems like, it's, you just play around with kids all summer long, which is a great part, but, they don't tell you that, especially at a sleepaway camp, it's 24/7 and Absolutely. You are working, you're working all the time and, and you're going to have to deal with all these types of different people and different campers and different stuff. And, I have counselors who worked for me and they're out in the corporate world and they're doing hard things, just different variety of different things. And so many of them will tell me like that job, especially their first summer, it's like the job at camp was harder than like 10 times harder than the job that I have now. You wouldn't think it, but they're like, but it helped prepare them to succeed in the job that they have that they're currently in. And they're like, it's a very difficult.
Absolutely. Job, so. I mean, it does require a lot of energy, and that passion, you're absolutely right, it's got to be there, because if you don't have that passion, it will it's very hard to maintain that energy across the summer, right? And it's such a well-loved and established community that it's really important to get the right fit. And I have to say, before I came to Canyon Creek, I had no idea on the scale of summer camps in America. In England, where I grew up, it just wasn't really a thing, or at least it certainly wasn't on the same scale as in America. So in England, my experience was just of a sports day program taking place in a small pool in the summer, or camping in a little tent in the rain for a few days. or you're with your guide group or the school. But in America, it's like a whole phenomenon. I've met so many people who have been to camp. What was your experience of camp growing up? And did you, so you attended camp yourself? Was it just the church camp that you went to, or did you have a few others that you'd been?
Yeah. So generally it was I had like a week of church camp. And then, so I never really went to day camp growing up. So it was always sleepaway camp. It was something my sisters, my brother did. There's like, I grew up in the United Methodist Church. And so within that network, there was like 2 or 3 different camps in Indiana, like Southern Indiana and stuff, that the church owned. And so I would go there. And it was a week long, kind of similar to Camp Creek, not nearly as big of a scale, and a lot more Jesus in it than Canyon Creek has, because it has 0. But similar-ish, type of experience and things like that. With and so that was great. And then I went to those for the first few years, but then I went to camp in Michigan, which is what I would consider like my camp growing up. I went there for 4 or 5 years. A camp called Spring Hill up in Michigan, and it's a Christian camp too, but not from just that specific church. It's kind of like a non-denominational thing. And that camp is, the programming and the level, it puts Canyon Creek it's just massive. It's like so we'll have about 260 kids per session. And so when I started, we maxed out, at like 150. And so I've been a part of growing camp all the way to 260. We can't really grow much, unless we
bigger than that,
grow ground on more part of a site or whatever. But we're busting at the seams, which is great, which has been a really cool thing to be a part of, to help grow. The camp that I went to called Spring Hill, just the teen camp alone. So they had different camps broken into it. Just the teen camp had about 480 kids per week.
Wow.
So they are, they're probably 1,500 kids a week.
Yeah.
And so it's just massive. The camp it's really cool. But it's funny because I used to ride BMX bikes growing up, and they had a BMX camp. So they had specialties. So they had like general camp. So you could just, like what Canyon Creek is. And obviously more, there's a lot of religious aspects to it too.
Yeah.
But then they had specialty like basketball or sports or whatever. And they had a BMX camp. So my childhood friend, that's why we went first. We went to BMX camp. And so we got to like ride bikes and skate park and everything. And then after my first summer, I just did general camp there.
So what has camp meant to you? Why do you think it's such an important contribution to the world?
Yeah. Well, I think it's one of those things that camp is good at. I think it's one of those things that, and experiences that probably means more to you when you're looking back on it than you realize when you're in it. And so kind of that same thing with camp. Like you're talking about passion. Like I didn't realize it. I just went to that camp fair and got a job, and then I loved camp, and then I kept working, and then I just kind of almost stumbled into it.
Yeah.
But then looking back on it, and I'm like, oh, great. Like, yeah, I love camp. I love working with people and working with kids and being creative and all of that. And it's like, it really does fit a lot of my passions. I just didn't, I just didn't
put them together.
Yeah, exactly. But I'm a big advocate for camp in general. And so once I've, worked at Canyon Creek, I'm also, heavily involved with the American Camp Association, the ACA, which is the governing body of all camps per se. And so I'm very heavily involved with them, and, help run a leadership conference. I'm the co-chair of that, 400 people or so camp professionals come from around the country every year. And so I believe in it, in camp in general. And I think it's mainly because I think people learn and grow the most through experiences. And whether that's learn about themselves, learn about, others or whatever. I think there's nothing better than experiencing it. And I think camp we're just in a unique position where I can teach kids life lessons under the veil of summer camp or, whatever.
Yeah.
it's just kind of teed up. And so I can teach them things and about themselves and about life that, school just can't. It's just not equipped to do. And so, I'm a big believer where I think everyone should go, and like everything in life, it might not fit. It might not be, I definitely understand that, camp's not for every single person. Now, I do think there is a camp for everyone. You just might not be in your area where you live or whatever, but I'm a big believer that there is a camp for everyone that would fit. But I think, just a big proponent of it, for what it does for people, both young and old. I would tell anyone, if they're coming out of high school, get a job in summer camp.
Yeah.
It's not going to pay what, you might make at, whatever job at your hometown or whatever. And this is day camp or sleepaway camp. Obviously, I'm from a sleepaway. I work, I run a sleepaway camp. I really only went to sleepaway camp. So that's kind of my lane. And while day camp is great, and you'll gain some of the things, you won't necessarily gain all of what sleepaway camp can offer.
Yeah.
Just because you're in this insane bubble for 3 months, and just the relationships you make with your coworkers and with your campers and just the work itself, like it tends to be just a lot deeper, just because of the way it's set up. And so, yeah, and anyone, I would tell any kid or anyone coming out of high school, I mean, I would say get a job at summer camp, because it will, it will help prepare you for any job that you will have. Yeah,
I couldn't agree more. I think definitely you might not go into camp for the money, but I think the value you can get from it is money genuinely can't buy. Like that will come back to you tenfold on what you can learn there. And certainly when I came to Canyon Creek, I was 22. I literally just finished 3 years of university, which obviously you pay a lot of money for, and I found value in it. But in terms of life experience, and a lot of people, not everyone gets to go to university, and those who do say, it'll be the greatest 3 years of your life. You'll learn so much. But actually, I genuinely feel like my biggest growth as a person, and when I finally actually kind of started to work out who I was and what I wanted to contribute, was at camp. So for me personally, it's I'm indebted. It's something I would never be able to pay that experience back.
Yeah. And so many, yes, I talked to so many people that's the same, thing. I mean, I've had a ton of people that have come to camp after their freshman or sophomore year, and then they completely change majors.
Yes,
like they go back and they're like, oh, I can't, like, I was doing this, I was doing that. I really, 99% of the time for the better. Sometimes
they're
like, well, maybe I should do this. I'm like, well, I don't know.
Yeah. Let's think about this
a little. Yeah. Like, don't, I've seen that a number of people want to change everything. But I think that just speaks to the power of it and the power of the experience, for better or for worse. And most 9 out of 10 times for better.
It's so powerful. It absolutely is. And I think you learn so much about leadership, and you personally have been such a big mentor to myself, and I know so many others. Did you have anyone that inspired you growing up? Did you have a mentor? And was there anyone particularly in a camp setting that you really looked up to?
Yeah. There was a couple. It's funny. I had a counselor named Matt. This is the name of my brother, oddly enough. But this counselor named Matt, and I remember my very first summer at camp. He would wake us up to. Do you remember the band Bush?
Yes.
Yeah. So not their big ballad hit Glycerine, but the song Machine Head, which is like this really loud song. He would wake us up every morning to that song. That was like, and I loved it. And so I remember my very first summer as a counselor, I woke my kids up on the very first day of camp to that song, just because I was like, I'm finally counsel, I'm going to do it. And like the first, and they hated it. They were like,
it wasn't the same.
No, it was not the same. But it's funny because I don't even, so like the 4th day of camp, we're on a hike and he got stung by a bunch of bees and he was allergic by bees. And I got a new counselor. I never saw him again.
No.
After 4 days.
That's so sad.
They said like he like left or whatever. I had a new counselor, but so growing up, I mean, I had a couple counselors. A guy named, oddly enough, his name was Nick, and he was this just really cool. Like I think he was probably a genuinely cool person. But speaking to like, and I always tell counselors this, they, you're going to be like the rock star. Like your campers are going to love every single thing you do, for better or for worse. They will like look up to you. I mean, it's like the job is halfway there. You just have to like take the ball across the goal line because they just, and the same thing, this guy, I mean, I think he was probably objectively probably pretty cool too, but like he had like this bleach hair and like this studded belt. I just was like, it was just this cool dude. But also kind of took the time to like talk to you.
That makes all the difference.
And no matter who it was. So like he was my counselor. But like he would sit and talk with anyone. And just kind of take that time. So I think someone like him, for sure, when I got into when I kind of stumbled into camp, I think I took some of that with me. So necessarily wasn't a mentor my whole life.
Yeah.
But definitely looking back, there's a lot of, I can kind of point to those things, and kind of, I think I probably emulate a lot of him.
That's amazing. And I think it shows the power of counselors, and you're absolutely right. Kids do look up to you so much, like as a counselor. And I think it creates more, especially I think if you've been a camper and been in that experience, I'd imagine it creates a lot more empathy when you're a counselor yourself, and really does affect the way that then you wish to lead. Even if maybe rush in the morning didn't have the same effect.
Yeah. Well, so in talking about like what I look for counselors, especially, did you grow up at summer camp? Did you have, did you go to sleepaway camp as a kid? And that's not the end all be all question. Like I said, for me, it's, can I tell that you're in it for the right reasons? That's kind of my sort of North Star of when I'm interviewing people. But that certainly is a big part, because camp is such an experiential thing that it's really hard to put into words and to explain it. But if someone goes to it, someone works at it, someone grew up at it, it's like, it's very easy because you don't really have to explain it because you've experienced it. And so, definitely, counselors that we hire that have grew up at camp, whatever camp it might be, they tend to do pretty well. Just because they learn, they knew what it was like. So like when I was a counselor, I think I was prepared to be a better counselor because I had great counselors as a kid. And so I knew like, oh gosh, that was really great when I was 10, the way he explained this. Or, I remember one summer, like our cabin was just not bonding. But they helped us, kind of see through our differences and things like that. And so like, it just helped me, once again, I think camp in general, I think anything that's experiential, you're going to learn. If you can experience it, you're going to learn way more than you ever could by just reading something or by,
Definitely. It's that like inner wisdom, isn't it, really? And also it's so powerful to see like all of these people that were campers have this like so much excitement to then be a counsellor because they've had such a powerful experience. And having not had the opportunity to be a camper myself, I remember that really struck me when I came to Canyon Creek, and especially at Canyon Creek, seeing like the length of time that Canyon Creek has been part of these people's lives. Like they've gone 10 years in a row, like from camper to then counsellor, and the genuine pride and excitement that they have to finally be a counsellor themselves, I think is really telling about the camper. For sure.
And that's why when we started, or when Jeff and Daryl and Natalie started, Canyon Creek, one of their biggest, the first 2 years, they were like, gosh, we cannot wait to get to that year where they start to, our campers start to be counselors.
Yes.
And I came in 2006. So I really saw I was there for the first campers that were turning into counselors.
Special.
And I was there for the first campers that became, a CIT coordinator or head counselor or whatever. And to see that, the pride that they have and to see that kind of their path, is really cool. And it's
special.
Definitely really, really special.
Yeah.
To see it. And that's why we try to hire, we certainly have a cap because you want to have our campers have a lot of different experiences. And, I think it would be a disservice if we only hired people who are campers, just from being an eclectic, camp and just meeting people from all around the world and different parts of the US. But we certainly, try to have at least, 15 to 20% of our staff, as former campers, just because they get it.
Yeah. And I think that's so smart. And like you say, it kind of works both ways in that it's that experiential ness that kind of adds to the role. And I guess if you are also hiring counsellors that maybe are new to the experience, then they can kind of have empathy with the campers that are experiencing it for the first time. And I felt like a camper. I behaved like a counsellor, I assure you. But I could absolutely understand the brand new campers I had in my cabin and the wonder and the excitement, because I was feeling that myself at the same time.
Yeah, and you're also feeling like the nervousness and the anxiety of
exactly
being in a place. And it's funny because it's like everyone I always have this thought that everything's relative.
Mm-hmm.
And even as an adult, everyone has anxiety in a new situation. And will I make friends, or will people like me?
Yeah,
it doesn't matter if you're going into first grade or if you're going into your fifth corporate job. It's the same feeling. And if you can understand it and kind of name it, you can make a bond with, with other people. Like some people, I feel like empathy to me is, I guess I understand why it can be hard to people, but it's also frustrating. It shouldn't be hard because everyone's gone through the same thing.
Yeah.
Having empathy for someone shouldn't, it's unfortunate that it's a skill that some people don't
have.
Quite.
Yeah.
You don't, because it's you just look at your life. I mean, everyone's experiencing, at its core level, everyone's, experiencing similar things. Of course, people are experiencing far worse things. Going back to the beginning of our conversation, I think one thing I'm most grateful for right now is that I don't have a lot of things that I'm not grateful for, just in general. But I think on an empathy level, I mean, we've all felt those anxiety and all that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we are certainly growing up in an interesting time. I mean, I'm only 27 years old, and even from my early teenage years to now, there's been such a vast surge in online communication and particularly social media. I mean, I don't think social media was even a concept when I was younger. But so many people, especially young people now, rely on online connection. Has that brought challenges in running a camp that embraces real in-person connection and spending so much time in an outdoor environment? What's your experience been with this?
Yeah, it's harder for counselors than I think it is for campers. We have a lot of campers who, especially as they get older, or some of our teenagers especially, they'll tell me, I can't wait to go to camp for 2 weeks or 3 weeks or 4 weeks, whatever it is, because I get to not be with my phone. And I don't have to have the pressures of, do I post this? Do I not post this? Do I like this? Did the post I get the same amount of views that I usually get? Or, all of those types of metrics that, unfortunately, I think a lot of our kids are basing their kind of social status or just their emotional well-being on. They can get away from it. It's harder, I think, for our counselors because it is a job, and they still want to be connected with their family and stuff. So it's interesting because I've seen when I grew up, so when I graduated high school, I remember I was really big into MySpace.
Yeah, I knew you were going to say this.
But I remember when Facebook you still had to have a college email address to get on Facebook. And so I remember after our senior year of high school, that summer when you would go, all your friends would go to like their college orientation. That's usually when you got your college email address. And it was kind of like, did you set up an account? And I remember the first year I never used Facebook because like no one's really on this. And I saw the transition. And I say that just to put in perspective that how it's grown and how quickly it's grown too, that, we tell our counselors from the beginning, like, you are looking after kids, right? I mean, you have a huge job, like, and an important job, and you need to be on it and you need to be attentive the whole time. And so, you can't be on your phone and this and that. And so I think it has not really been a struggle with campers. Okay. You'll have those couple campers who try to sneak their phone in or whatever, but we're pretty adamant on, we're a no technology camp. And I love tech. I mean, if there's something that a lot of people know, I'm a big Apple person and stuff. So I certainly, but that's one thing I love about our camp. And like I said, there's camps for everyone. So coding camps and those things, those are hugely important and really, really cool. Just with our mission and our kind of our culture, it's just, that's what we decided to really focus on not. And so we have a lot of parents that love that. When I go to camper fairs and things, like some parents, I've never met a parent who, when I've told them that, they were like, like they were against it. It's all, and they're like, oh my gosh, that's a great, and an amazing thing. So I would say campers, it's been great. And you've really seen them love to let go. Counselors, it's been, a struggle, I guess. I mean, not too hard, but if, definitely more difficult to try to break them away, because, it is a job and, their time off, a lot of them are from, you're from across the world and you want to be connected and camp is a great thing to go in this bubble and just kind of like disappear from the world. Yeah. It's one of the best things, one of my favorite things. And one of the more addicting things about camp is to like, okay, once I get there, like, like I had a good friend, and who was a head counselor and was kind of like one of my first kind of mentors at Canyon Creek. She used to tell people, like, text your friends and be like, hey, like, when I go to camp, I'm all in. So like, I'll see you in August, like, perfect. I'm not going to be, and I have that with friends too. I mean, a lot of people now know, like, and especially in my position, for me to be effective and to really succeed and to make sure everyone else is succeeding, I have to be, I have to be all in. So like a lot of camp directors and stuff will like, I'll have dinner in May, like right before, and with them, and we always joke like, oh, we'll see you on the other side. We'll talk to you in August. Have a good summer. But so going back to the tech stuff and social media and things, it's harder for our counselors, certainly. But the thing that I've noticed more, which I don't know if it's good or bad. I mean, you can see both sides of it. Before, I felt like some of our counselors who might have been abusing the phone policy of like, they're at the lake and they're trying to, take photos or post or whatever. I was a little more, I don't want to say hard on them or whatever, because it's like, I felt like they were making a choice. Yes. Like they knew that there was a policy and then whatever. The last couple of years, I've honestly seen people that will post photos on like their story on Instagram or Snapchat or whatever it is. And I don't think they even, like, I think they understand that's against, they shouldn't be doing it. Yeah. But they're so ingrained to do it that it's not like they're making the decision to like, okay, like one of the rules is I'm not supposed to be on my phone now. It's like, they're so ingrained of like, I'm at a new place and I have to show everyone that I'm at a new place. Yes. And I have to post it. And not even like I have to, it's just like I've been ingrained to, like, it's like, people like always joke like, oh, if you don't have a picture, like, did it happen sort of thing. It's like, So that, I think that's one of the biggest things I've noticed in the transition of our staff is that it's so ingrained in them to post something that it's not like they're
intentionally doing it.
Yeah. It's not they're intentionally, breaking this policy. It's just like they just have their phone out. It's like I've caught some people like, hey, like can you put your phone there? Like I've had some people like, oh yeah, sorry. Like it's like they're in a fog. Like I'm like like they're like, oh yeah, of course I'm not supposed to. Like they're so ingrained to do it.
Absolutely. And I think social media can be such a powerful tool for good and bad. And I think it can show what an addictive thing it can be. And I actually think that's one of the biggest things we can learn from the kids at camp, and children in general, of how present they are and able to be, because they're just in the moment with that real connection and what's in front of them, and they're reacting to people and the environment.
I would say most of our counselors by the end of the summer, they love it too.
Yes.
Or by the middle, like it's just harder for them to break that and to really, and we talk about it during staff training too. I try to, it used to be more of a social media talk of like, we used to have like social media policy, just like we try to be more like hard on like, this is a rule, whatever. And now I think we've transitioned in our training to more of like, use this as an opportunity to break away from it and to really embrace and be present. And I think it's helped more in our training of our counselors, going from that type of place, from less of a you're breaking a rule and this is a policy, to more of a embracing the positives of disconnecting from that and connecting into just being present. We've gotten more buy-in, I think. And certainly the first couple of weeks is hard for anyone, for a new place and whatever, but
breaking a habit.
Yeah. But I think it's been good.
Absolutely.
And I have a lot of people, that, will tell me in the summer, like, gosh, it's been so great to like, not be on it or whatever.
Yeah, I think it's a gift, really. I found it such like almost like a meditative experience, really, because you're just so present for that entire time. And we've mentioned quite a few times about Canyon Creek, and you're one of the directors. So Canyon Creek also happens to be my favorite place. So when was Canyon Creek created, and what do you hope it will contribute to the world?
Yeah, so we started in 2001, and Jeff Robinson and Daryl Moss and Natalie Moss. So, Jeff he helped run the Beverly Hills Basketball League, and so did a lot of like little sport, like kids sports league and stuff like that. And Daryl ran a successful day camp in Los Angeles, and then ran all at this park, and then ran all of like, as a park called Cheviot Hills, and he ran like the basketball league, for the kids, and the baseball and all that stuff. And so Jeff met him through there, and really was always impressed with how operational he ran everything, and his attentive to the details and just kind of everything. He was always, and really impressed. And so Jeff went to camp growing up, and he always had a dream of owning a camp. He worked at a camp and just was kind of like, this would be the best thing. And so he was he had a family business that he, was helping run. And then, he kind of told Daryl that in, the late 90s, that he was like, hey, I think I'm getting out of the family business. I think we're going to sell the family business. And my goal is to find a camp and buy it. And you're the person I want to, want to start it with. And so that conversation kept happening for every year. And then, Daryl always says, that one year just kind of had a different tone. And so they met and they kind of started, and then they got Canyon Creek in 2001. And we started, similar structure, and we have 5 sessions and that type of thing. But I think the first session in 2001 had, I think 20 some kids or 30 kids or so. I think for the whole summer, they had maybe 150-ish, 200 kids, kind of total out of all the sessions.
Wow.
Maybe a touch more, but not, pretty low, maybe 150-ish or so, which is, was fine for your first year. But then, now we have over 1,000 kids will come through a summer.
Amazing.
And so, they started, their biggest session was like 30 or 40 kids. Now our biggest session is 265, basically.
Yeah.
Like when I started as a counselor, we were like going crazy. Like, oh my gosh, we have 150 kids this session. Like, how are we going to, I remember like talking like in the staff meeting, they would be like, I don't know how we're going to do it, but we're going to do it. And then now, and that was when I was a counselor, and now, been fortunate enough to be the director.
Mm-hmm.
And now it's just like, we kind of laugh. We're like, what we thought were, and at the moment, at the time, were big issues and trying to solve. Now we're like looking back, like, it's like,
if only we knew.
It's exactly it's
humble
like,
beginnings.
Yeah, exactly. So, so we're pretty, pretty full. There's certain sessions that, I'd love to sell out completely, but I think, I've been fortunate enough to be a part of, especially the admin team. But starting as a counselor the last 15 years, but I would say when I joined the admin team, like 4 years in, so basically the last 10 years, I've been fortunate enough to have my hand and be a part of probably the biggest growth period of camp, and being able to see it up front and being on an admin level to be able to help make decisions and craft kind of where we're going and how we've gotten there. There's still plenty to do and to grow, certainly still, but so it's been really good. And to kind of see where to go from here. I mean, there's certainly some, talking about just summer camp alone, there's certainly things, spots we can grow and enrollment wise, but I think in general, with our nonprofit and everything we've done, it's just trying to bring camp to as many people as we can.
Absolutely. And anyone who has visited and experienced Canyon Creek, myself included, seems to have gained so much value from their experience. It truly is such a special place and has changed so many people's lives for the better. And I know many people talk about the magical effect that Canyon Creek seems to have, whereas Daryl and Natalie and Jeff and who are the other camp directors, and probably even yourself, would say that this is nothing to do with magic, but everything to do with intention. And so what is the intention that you've all set out to create, and how have you tried to achieve this?
Yeah. There's a lot of truth to that, for sure. When people talk about, the magic of camp and all of that, there is a lot. I do think there is some magic. There are some things that happen at camp that just weirdly just can't happen anywhere else. Or like, man, we thought that was going to be bad, but of course it wasn't going to be bad because it's camp and that's what, whatever. Or vice versa. We thought that was going to go great. And of course it didn't go great. We had to plan 7 new different things because, of this and that. And that's some of the stuff that I love about camp, is just the unpredictability of it. But, when people say the magic of camp, I certainly think, you don't want to discredit the vast amount of time and energy and intention that's put into it.
Yeah.
And so I would say, when people think of the magic, I think there is a magic of camp, but I think it's like a 10% sort of thing. And it's an incredible 10% and it's a 10% that you could never plan for, you can never, or whatever. But, and people always say, like, when I tell them, I'm the camp director, and one of the biggest questions, and it usually comes from people that didn't grow up in camp, which is fine. They're like, oh, like, what do you do the rest of the year? I'm like, okay, well, the reason those 3 months are so magical, or the reason that 1 week for your kid, and they can't literally stop talking about it in December, the reason that is because of the immense hours and time that myself and the team have put in the last 9 months.
Yeah.
Or that 1 week. So all the other 51 weeks that they weren't at camp.
It's been a long year.
Yeah. It's like we planned a lot and we put a lot into it. And that's why that week is so impactful. And, then I say, like, of course, that 10% of magic, it just happens for that kid and whatever. But, there's a ton of intentionality put into it.
I think with that as well, like Canyon Creek's main values and definitely an intention from you is family and respect.
Yeah.
And that really is the camp ethos. And I think every camper and staff member wholeheartedly grows to embody this over their time there, because of the activities being based around that, how we are encouraged to talk and speak to each other, the planning that's involved. It really does feel like you are part of a family and community. What does that community mean to you, and how has your experience of being part of a community, like what was your experience of being part of a community before coming to Canyon Creek, and how have you tried to grow that at camp?
I think speaking to like the magic of camp and the intentionality behind it, family and respect has been our cornerstone from the very beginning. So like my very first year in 2006, it was like, it's the first thing that I learned, and it's to this day. So the first thing that we tell people in an interview and then, during staff training, we talk about it. And I think all the work that we put into it, I don't want to leave the family respect aspect up to chance. Like I want to make sure we put the time in to make sure that those are our cornerstones and people are respected and they come and they do feel like it's family. Those two things very well could happen at camp. But like I said, I don't want to leave it up to chance. I want to do everything that we can to make sure that we're living it, and we're also creating a community and a culture that promotes it. And I've been incredibly fortunate, I think, my whole life to have a sense of community and to be in a community. I think one of the things I've been most fortunate of is I've been fortunate enough to be a part of a lot of different communities. And I, maybe it's a strength of mine, or, I probably part strength and part just luck. But I've been able to kind of bounce around a lot of different, communities and friend groups and different walks of life and different things. And so I think because I've been blessed to have that, I know what it feels like. And I also want people to feel that.
Yeah.
And so I think it's helped me to really make sure we're growing the community aspect and that's part of our culture at camp.
Yeah.
Because I know what it can do for people, and I can empathize from the standpoint of, I know what it's like to have been part of community most of my life, pretty much all my life. So I can only imagine what it feels like for someone who doesn't have it. And I've been fortunate enough not be in that position. But I try to use that I kind of flip it and be able to, like, oh gosh, I can't imagine what my life would be like without community. And so, it makes me want to strive and work harder to make sure that people feel it. Because there are countless people that don't have it and that aren't a part of it. And so it's like, I can't even imagine, but it has to be extremely difficult and just pretty terrible. And so I think knowing that and feeling that and growing up with it, it's helped me try to put in the extra step. And like I said, I don't want to leave it up to chance. I want to do everything that I can to create a program for our campers and counselors, anyone that comes through the gates, to feel the community and the family and respect. Like I said, I would like to think it more than likely would happen, but you don't want to take that chance. So I want to do every hour that I can to make sure that I know for a fact when they come through the gates, they're going to feel it. And whether that's the people that we hire and to help, facilitate it, or just all the little things about, anything and everything to make sure that they feel it. Cause I think if you're going to spend the time, whether, it's family and respect for us and a greater sense of community, whether it's that or, whatever it is for your business and whatever, your mission is. I mean, it better not be your mission if you're not willing to put the work and the time into making it, making it be that. So if we're going to tell people it's family and respect and all this, it's like, well,
you got to
live
put
the time and hours to live it. Yeah.
Yeah. So beautifully said. And you really do live that at Canyon Creek. You can see how much that is at the heart of everything you do, Nat, Daryl, and Jeff. Of, like you said, that has been the cornerstone. And I remember you saying once, and it was so powerful, that basically everything the real world tries to be but fails at, like camp succeeds at. And you really put so much work into making sure that that family and community aspect is there. And I definitely think you are someone that is so open and willing to work in other communities. And it's such a beautiful thing to be a part of a place that makes it so easy for someone else to feel part of a community. I mean, I've been lucky to be part of lots of different communities, but I don't think I've ever found it as welcoming or so easy to feel like part of a community or truly understand what it means to be part of one, and that nature of community then at Canyon Creek. So I think you will do that so beautifully. And appreciate y'all.
Oh no, I mean, thank you. I mean, it feels good to hear that, because once again, it just kind of validates all the time put in when people like yourself, experience it and feel that, and it's thank you.
It's
I guess
it's powerful. Thank you. Another one of your big passions that we haven't mentioned yet is music. Music is personally so important to me, and I think you are such a creative and talented musician, and I know many Creekers would agree, and your songs are in fact camp famous. I think every Creeker knows every word, and they have been the inspiration for many special moments at camp. What has it felt like to be able to share your songs at camp and have so many opportunities there to share a talent that's so special to you?
It's weird, but also great and cool and funny, and there's I think a lot of things rolled into one. It's certainly a part of my life that's been huge, and it was huge. I mean, it was, if there was a passion in my life that I really wanted and thought, like looking at camp, like, it makes sense that I'm in this position, right? In this career, and that I've been able to succeed, because it checks a lot of boxes that looking back, I realized I had, but going into it, like I said, I just kind of stumbled into this. On the flip side, if there's one thing I'd always, growing up, especially like in middle school, when I, first learned how to play guitar and stuff, was I always wanted to be in a band and tour and do all of that. And so while, and I did that for a small amount of time and went on some tours and stuff, which is great. But it's certainly helped kind of extend that and get a chance to share it with people and get to play it. And it's also kind of funny because I'm, playing songs I wrote 12 and 13 years ago. But it's great. I mean, I'm grateful for it. No matter how kind of funny it is, I'm like, okay, I'm singing this old pop punk song that I wrote when I was 19. But I'm very grateful that people would want to hear it, and certainly, and it's fun to continue, because I think, being a musician and writing and playing music and stuff, like, it's something I'll always do. But it's nice to still be able to share it. I don't necessarily play out and release a ton of stuff like I used to, but it's certainly, I'm grateful that it's kind of helped keep that just performing part alive. And who knows, maybe I'll write and record more and do things again, but it's definitely, I've been grateful for it.
For sure. And I think that playfulness and you being willing to share your talent, it kind of at camp we see that as a knock-on effect, and it allows kind of gives other people permission to give things a try. And one of my favorite things about Canyon Creek is the safe environment it creates that allows people to be their true selves instead of thinking, why would you? I think camp very much creates a mindset of why wouldn't you? Like, why wouldn't you stand on your chair at lunchtime and create your own dance party to your favorite tune on your own? Why wouldn't you do that?
Exactly.
It seems like a safe bet that every camper and counsellor will leave camp with a lot of fun stories and a heart full of memories. And I think for everyone, we talk about camp like has a click moment, right? Like for me, I was very fortunate from the get-go coming through the Canyon Creek gates. It was like, this feels right. And I think the first time I met Daryl and Natalie in person, it was to the Lion King theme song, holding their children in the air. And I was like, you know what? I can get behind this, I think. I like
it's just
it.
It's your right kind of weird.
Yeah, exactly. What for you was your click moment?
Yeah, so I share this every year during staff training because, I think it's important for people to know that it happens differently for everyone. Mm-hmm. And so when someone comes to camp now and sees me, I would assume that they would assume that it just is always clicked. Like there was never a click moment because it just has always been that way. But it wasn't at all. Mm-hmm. My very first summer in 2006, we talked about earlier, kind of how I serendipitously got to camp. Yeah. But once I got there, I kind of went in like, I grew up at camp. This is me great. Mm-hmm. And after the first day, I remember I called my mom and I said, they're great people, nice people. Mm-hmm. But it's not for me. Like it's doing camp that, being, it's not. And I remember her telling me like, it's been the one day, give it some time. And during staff training, we always give people time to check in at night back home. Cause we kind of tell them, hey, you're not going to be on your phone much, but like this week, the first couple of days, let people know you're safe and all that stuff. So each night, I would call. And I remember that was Sunday. So Monday night I called and I talked to her about, it's okay, but still feeling that way. And then on Tuesday we called and it was the same thing. And she was like, I was like, let's just look at flights,
Yeah.
You don't need, she was like, oh, look at flights, we got to book something, whatever. And she was kind of like, finish the week out, they invested in you, whatever. And I was like, okay. So then Wednesday, that was Monday. So then Tuesday, I was like dead set. I was like, okay, Wednesday, I'm going to call you tomorrow and I'm going to, we'll book it, go on and we'll find when there was a flight, on Saturday night and whatever. And so I remember Wednesday during the day at lunch. And I cannot remember the joke. I don't even really remember who was at my table. But we were sitting there and someone told a joke. And it was one of those that kind of just like everyone's just like in tears laughing.
Yeah.
Just kind of a joke and just kind of rolls. And like I said, I don't remember it because it didn't really matter what it was. No. But I remember that's like the moment that it clicked. Feeling, and I kind of looked around in the dining hall and looked at who we were laughing. We were kind of all in tears. And I was like, you know what? I think I could do a summer. Yeah. Like, I don't, so I remember calling my mom later that night and she was kind of like, okay, like what flight? And I was like, told her, I was like, no, I think I can do it. It just took a little bit to click. And I said, I can do one summer, I can do a summer, like it'll be, fine. And then, 15 years later, the joke's still on me. But I always tell people that just because it certainly clicks differently for some people. And I think, and I've had a ton of staff that really appreciate that story. And I always tell that like the first day or so, because I tell people like, look, so for some of you, it clicked a month ago when you got hired, or for some of you, the second you got here, the second you got on a flight. And I said, there's plenty of you. And there's probably some people that you think it's clicked, but it hasn't. And you're, like it's going to take its time, and it might be tomorrow. It might not even be during staff training. It might be session 1 or 2 before it really, clicks. I said, but if you give it your all and you really kind of open yourself to it and to the experience, then it will happen, and it will be a random thing. It will not be some big moment that clicks. It'll just be this one random moment, like it was for me, that it'll work. And so,
Yeah, no, I love that story. And even though all the way back in 2015, I remember that and being there in that moment. And it had such an impact on me because I was sitting there thinking, it does make you think about the click moment. And I was like, gosh, actually, I'm really lucky like that. It was pretty much an instant click from the moment I went through the doors. But first of all, it made me think that might not be the same for everyone. And I'm part of this family and this community now. And I was looking around at the other counsellors that we're in our training week and we're going to be here a whole summer. And I was like, this feels so special to me. I'm part of this community and I need to make sure that everyone stays the summer, and can also feel like this. And then looking ahead, I was like, gosh, if we feel like that as adults and maybe it's not clicked yet, then what could that be like for the campers? And that really stuck with me the whole summer for both the counsellors and the campers of I've had that click and it's so special that I want everyone to feel like this. So could I help make a click moment,
Yeah.
And that really stuck with me. So I'm so glad you shared that.
And the interesting thing is you can, but you can't, right? Like you like talking about like that 10%, 90%, like you can certainly create the scenario and whatever, but like the click is for everyone, it's going to be different and it's going to be kind of organic and it's going to, so it's like you can get it there close. And that's all you can do, and you can hope it does. And like I said, it's for 99% of the people, it does, and it's random. And it's like I said, sometimes you have to put a lot of work into it. Sometimes you don't. Sometimes, I've had counselors that like it clicked like the last night of camp, and then now they've worked like 3 or 4 summers after that. And not to say that their summer was bad. I mean, it was a great summer, but it just like at the end of the summer, the weight of it all, it finally hit them of like, why they were feeling that way or why they're so sad to go home or this or that. And it's like, that was the moment. And it just, for them, it just had to be, the moment was looking back on it all versus, a moment in the beginning or the middle.
Nick, you're one of my favorite people and you work at one of my favorite places. And I personally believe that the whole world should get to experience the joy of knowing both Nick Coffing and Canyon Creek. So how can they do this? Where can they find you?
Yeah. So just canyoncreeksummercamp.com. We'll find everything. I'm sure you can link it in the show notes of the episode. But that's the best place to kind of learn more about camp. And obviously, if you're kind of in that point in your life where you might want to work at camp, whatever, you can apply there, or you can just follow us. All of our social and everything is on that. We have a ton of video content and stuff. So even if you're not in the position to work or have a kid that wants to go, whatever, you just want to kind of learn more about it. There's a ton of great video content that you can kind of give you a sense of what we do, why we do it, and how we do it.
Amazing. So go to canyonCreek.com. And as we are sadly approaching the end of the podcast, can you think of any positive words of advice that you would like to leave us with?
Just, I don't know, try to find the community that challenges you to be a better person and continue to stick with it, and stay in that community. But I would also say, just try to find something to be grateful for every day. Because it's probably not as hard as you might think it is.
No, I agree. And we started with the gratitude and we ended with the gratitude. I love it. Nick Coffing, I always feel better having talked to you. Thank you for always bringing your warmth and acceptance. Thank you for your leadership. You may well be the silliest leader I know, but I am blessed for having learned from you. And thank you for being my kind of person.
Oh, no, thank you. It's been an honor to even be asked. So this is really, really great.